On yesterday's show, we asked the Mets to make some changes to help their offense, and here comes Mark Vientos in an unorthodox move.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. From brake parts to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that win, so keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Well, the Mets embarrassed themselves again on Tuesday. They just could do nothing offensively. Aaron Nola with a complete game shutout. Yes, he was brilliant. He did not walk a batter. Would he strike out 8 and gave up only 4 hits. But it's still pretty frustrating to watch this lineup day in and day out. And I think the only silver lining of that entire game is the fact that the Mets were so taxed in their bullpen that they had to warm up Adrian Houser a couple times there. And Houser burned himself for Wednesday's game. Carlos Mendoza said after the game, he got hot. So now he's not going to be good to go for the spot start on Wednesday. They'd have to make another decision. There is a funny part of my brain that was thinking about this and said, what if this was like a chess move by Carlos Mendoza, who saw his team losing, didn't want to watch Adrian Houser pitch against Ranger Suarez on Wednesday, and he just got Houser up for a couple times, just burned him himself, said, sorry, David, we can't pitch him. Give me somebody else to start the game. I'm sure that's not actually what happened, but it's just a funny thought. Regardless, we all sort of put 2 and 2 together. All right, well, if it's not Houser, Joey Lucchesi due to start in Syracuse. Imagine he's going to get scratched, and we'll see Joey Lucchesi on Wednesday in Philly. Sure enough, he is scratched. But what was very interesting is it was not just Joey Lucchesi that was scratched from the Syracuse Mets starting lineup on Tuesday. It was also Mark Vientos. Mark Vientos is coming back to try to help this offense that desperately needs him. In his little 3-game cameo, he played a huge role in getting the Mets a big win with a walk-off homer. And now they're calling on his bat again to complement Brett Baty. But that is the really interesting wrinkle here. It's not a demotion of Brett Baty. When we were getting this news, and it was sort of piece by piece, it was, oh, Lucchesi is coming. Then Lucchesi and Vientos are coming. Do we know what the roster move is going to be? And I'm like a lot of you on X or Twitter, I'm sending out some tweets. I'm texting the insiders, trying to put my 2 cents in on what's happening here. And my thought initially, when I just saw Vientos is coming, is, well, Brett Baty's probably going down, because I didn't think the Mets would go without a middle infielder to back up Francisco Lindor or Jeff McNeil. So I really thought it was going to be one of 2 options. Either Brett Baty was going to get sent down and Mark Vientos was going to be the everyday third baseman for the New York Mets, or I thought maybe they're going to cut bait on Tyrone Taylor. I mean, there was an off chance in my head that DJ Stewart would get optioned because they have that roster flexibility to do that, but Stewart's been too good of a bat. Tyrone Taylor and Harrison Bader have overlapping skill sets. I didn't think you'd want to lose Taylor, but I was like, you know what? Maybe that's the move so that you can get Vientos up and you can keep Baty on the roster. Those were sort of the 2 things I was playing with in my head. A lot of people were saying, well, I guess that's goodbye to Joey Wendell. And I'll be honest, I didn't think it was, because I really did not believe the Mets would be bold enough to play without a backup shortstop or a backup second baseman, because that's what they're doing. They have made the move. Joey Wendell is done. I'm going to talk about him and the risk the Mets are playing with here in a minute. But what this ultimately comes down to is the Mets are trying to help this offense. And this might just be for this road trip. It might just be for going to Philly. You're playing in Miami next. Over the next 5 games, you're going to see Ranger Suarez, probably Braxton Garrett, and Jesus Luzardo. So obviously Suarez with the Phillies Garrett, and Luzardo with the Marlins. Those are 3 left-handed starters. And Mark Vientos homered off Ranger Suarez last year. So I think the initial thought is get Vientos in the lineup on Wednesday. That's going to give you a much better chance to win. But further, in this next run of games, he's going to start all those games against left-handed pitching, and Brett Baty will probably start against the righties, and they're going to be platooning at third base. And I imagine that when you're not facing that many lefties across a slate, if this is a longer-term thing, Mark Vientos is probably going to get some starts from Baty against righties. I think they're in pretty much a 50-50 timeshare or something close to it. You can even see these guys splitting games. So what I mean by that is Mark Vientos starts against Suarez. He gets 3 at-bats, plays the first 6 innings. Last third of the game, Brett Baty comes in for defense if the Mets have a lead. Other side of the coin, Brett Baty starts a game against a righty, and the Mets are down a run in the 6th inning, and the other team has a left-handed reliever ready for Brett Baty, so they go to him, and the Mets counter with Mark Vientos off the bench. You get Vientos versus a lefty in a big matchup and potentially a high leverage spot where he can come through for you and give you a big run. That's how they can play this. And for Brett Baty and for the third base position, this is exactly what the New York Mets needed to do. This is perfect because this takes a ton of pressure off of Brett Baty. And this allows you to get a guy on your bench and Mark Vientos that is pretty much now, along with DJ Stewart, the best hitter you can go to. There was a lot of times where you're going to a defensive first guy in Tyrone Taylor to be a pinch hitter. We talked about it after Monday's game. Taylor comes up in a big spot, and yes, he got a run in, but it was because Alec Bohm made an error on a pitch that Mark Vientos might have crushed, a slider that got a ton of plate, a little bit low in the zone. I mean, that's his bread and butter there to go down, get that, and drive the baseball. And all of a sudden, the Mets might have had a win on Monday if you had Mark Vientos. For the offensive side of this opens up a world of possibilities for Carlos Mendoza. Is JD Martinez still going to be starting pretty much every day at the DH spot? I think so. Could DJ Stewart still get starts from JD Martinez on the rare off day at DH? Absolutely. I think ultimately this is about third base. And those two guys, Baty and Vientos, competing for playing time. And we'll see. This could be something where it's a long-term solution, or it's, all right, you're both competing for a job here, some internal competition at the big league level, and whoever grabs it is the everyday guy. If Mark Vientos comes up and he hits the way he was in Syracuse or in that 3-game stint, and he immediately becomes one of the Mets' best hitters right now, well, Brett Baty is going to be relegated to a bench role, and ultimately you can option him and get another infielder up that can back up short and second. But for right now, this allows you to keep Baty on the roster, and I think the Mets really value him, and particularly the defense that he's brought at that position. I think it's the fact that they didn't take that decision to option him lightly that they ultimately go with Wendell. But as much as I wanted to see Wendell go, it still is pretty shocking that the Mets are going to be going into this next road trip with absolutely no options at shortstop other than Francisco Lindor and at second base other than Jeff McNeil. Those two guys, for the foreseeable future, will be there for every single pitch for the New York Mets because they simply have to. And how much stress does it put on those two guys? We're going to talk about that next, as well as, of course, we'll celebrate no more Joey Wendell. It is a great day on that front. So we'll talk about all that in just a minute. First, though, a word from our sponsors. Passion, drive, and patience are what brings home the winning trophy. It's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts to choose from for your ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that win and turn your car into the MVP. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Today was a fun day to interact with our Locked On Mets insider community because a lot was going on, from texting the Mets fans about the frustrating loss as it was going on, the Mets just couldn't hit, to talking about the options as far as the roster once Vientos was coming up. It was definitely a day that I really enjoyed engaging with that community. If you want to be part of it, part of our texting service, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. That's where you'll get all of the updates for me anytime something breaks on the Mets. You get the starting lineup texted to your phone each day, and you get to take part in our Locked On Mets sign giveaways. We had one just recently here where it was, how many hits will Jeff McNeil get on this homestand? And I was shocked when the results came in from our insiders on the picks that someone actually selected 2 hits in the 5-game homestand. Everybody else was at 4 or more. And the 2-hit guy got it right from a blue pit by Jeff McNeil at the end of that game on Tuesday. So it's been a lot of fun to talk with all of you. Appreciate everyone who subscribes. Now, let's talk about a guy that has had a pretty big part of the show this year, Joey Wendle. I won the jersey bet, folks. Every year we pick a Met that I do not believe in. It started with Jonathan VR. Then it was James McCann. Then it was Tommy Pham last year, and this year is Joey Wendle, a signing or a player that I look at on the roster and say, that guy's not going to do anything this year. And if they prove me wrong, I will buy a jersey from them. I've bought in 2, VR and Pham. I'm now 2 for 4 because I don't think we're going to see Joey Wendle again. And goodbye and good riddance to Wendle. He was horrible, and we don't need to go through the stats, the OPS under 500, the errors that he made that cost the Mets games. It was truly remarkable how bad he was and how many games he cost the Mets. And honestly, for a guy that made his bones in Tampa and was in Miami the last couple of years, I just feel like he wasn't cut out to play in New York. He is one of those guys that just, in my opinion, crumbled with the pressure of playing in a big market, knowing that all eyes were on him every time he stepped on the field. And he just really was horrible in a lot of ways. So getting him off the team is a benefit to the Mets, of course. And I think if you look at it under that lens, a guy that was providing you basically nothing and had at this point in the season basically been relegated to maybe starting for Jeff McNeil every once in a while and coming in for defense if Brett Baty got pinch hit for late in games, you're not losing much in that respect. With that said, it's still very unorthodox to not have anybody that can back up your middle infield. Nobody. Joey Wendle this year, if you look at his playing time, started 9 games, 6 at second base, sparing McNeil either because he was out of the lineup or he was getting a start in the outfield. 2 at third base when Brett Baty was dealing with the hamstring injury. 1 at shortstop with Francisco Lindor. The flu game, of course, where Lindor came in late and had all of his heroics. He played 3 games at shortstop this year. It was both ends of the flu game, the one where Lindor got pulled early and then the one where he didn't start. And then there was a game where the Mets were losing to the Dodgers 10-0 and they pulled Lindor because the game was over. So Francisco Lindor does not need a backup shortstop. The fact that Jeff McNeil is going to be running out there every day, it's kind of crazy because he's been one of the problems, but also, who knows, maybe this in some ways strangely could help Jeff McNeil in the sense that you're in the lineup, you're playing second base, you're never going out in the outfield. It simplifies everything. Go out and figure this thing out offensively. He is a guy that's durable and he should be able to do it. So it's strange to see, but what this comes down to is only a circumstance where one of those guys gets hurt mid-game, are you going to run into a problem here? And in that instance, I don't know. I guess Mark Vientos, who was drafted as a shortstop, but I couldn't tell you the last time he's played the position and not really a good defender even at third base. He's going to give us maybe Wilmer Flores 2.0 from 2015 if Lindor at some point goes down in a game and you're going to see it for a couple of innings and then he'll get somebody out. So it's definitely a bold move by this front office because you just don't see teams give themselves no options. But here we are. And ultimately, Joey Wendle played 89 innings through the first 41 games this year. That's it, 89 innings. They got 35 plate appearances. Mark Vientos in 2 weeks could match that total with the production that you might expect from him and the playing time he could get. So It makes a lot of sense. And it's unconventional. And I guess the only question is, how long term is this, right? How long can you go with this setup? If Lindor McNeil gets hurt, well, then obviously you have to make a move anyway, and then somebody comes up. I would think if one of those two third basemen, Baty or Vientos, gets hot and continues to push for more and more playing time to the point that the other guy's not used, then you'd make the move and send one of them down. But I think they're going to get some run here with this setup. And it's exciting because the Mets offense just got a lot better. You're subbing Joey Wendell's bat for Mark Vientos' bat. That's a huge, huge win. I don't think they can do this the entire season, but I think it's an interesting way to try to provide a spark to a team that desperately needs it. And I love that David Stearns is willing to make adjustments. And my next question to close the show is Adrian Houser going to join Joey Wendell as far as getting DFA'd? We'll talk about that next. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less than 2 or more player stats and you watch the winnings roll in. Right now, you can look at your favorite players from the diamond, add them to your Prize Picks entry. Maybe you're loving the idea of Mark Vientos back in the starting lineup, and you can take more or less on his RBIs, his hits, home runs. You can also look at Ranger Suarez's strikeouts. Maybe you want to, hedge against your happiness a little bit. Take more on Suarez's strikeouts. You can look at the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. You can actually combine across sports. So you can play basketball. That'd be a cool one. Basketball. You can play basketball, baseball, and hockey all in the same entry with quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players to choose from. Prize Picks is the #1 fantasy sports app. They also offer weekly promotions and special offers for the biggest moments in sports. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. With the NBA and NHL playoffs going on right now, you want to be locked into everything going on in the sports world. So make sure you tune in to Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that covers everything in the world of sports. You can also find it on Amazon Fire TV. Could Adrian Houser join Joey Wendell on the unemployment line? I know there's Mets fans that are hoping for this, and I just want to throw it out there as a possibility because David Stearns has said in the past that his general rule of thumb is that he waits 45 days into the season before he makes assessments. Well, today's May 15th. There was 30 days in April. Put those together, 45 days into the season. And oh yeah, there was also those couple days at the end of March. We're past that point. Quarter of the way in. This is the time to make some adjustments to your roster. And I think that's partly why we saw Joey Wendell get one last start on Tuesday, see what he had, and maybe why they were originally planning to give Houser a spot start as well. Sort of a last hurrah, see what they got, give him one more chance, one more audition, and then you make the moves. And the reason why I would say this might be time to DFA Houser too is because you have depth in your rotation. Here comes Joey Lucchesi right now. So that's one option that clearly is present. Tyler McGill is coming back. Should be good to go in this next turn in the rotation. And David Peterson as well is coming back. Started in Double-A today. That's good competition. This isn't facing low-A hitters that should be blown away by an MLB pitcher. Some good prospects that he was going up against. He went 5 1/3. He allowed 5 hits, did not walk a batter, and struck out 8, up to 70 pitches. He is eligible to return off the 60-day IL on May 27th. So that is another starting pitcher option that you have, and that's not even mentioning Kodai Senga. The Mets have the depth to get rid of Adrian Houser, and their bullpen could use another arm. Yes, Houser is technically that, but how about a reliever? Because the Mets are in a precarious position with their bullpen right now, just as much as you might look at their roster and say, man, if anything happens, they're kind of screwed when it comes to playing up the middle with Lindor and McNeil. in the bullpen right now, if there is a start, let's just say Joey Lucchesi in his spot start gets tagged and he's done in 3 innings, you're screwed right now. You got Edwin Diaz and Reed Garrett and Adam Ottavino, who all should be available. Okay, you got your late inning guys. But Jorge Lopez, Jake Diekman, I don't think either of them is going to pitch. Sean Reid-Foley 2 nights in a row can't pitch. Drew Smith is due to return, so that's great. That gives you a fresh arm. But how do you make room for Smith and Lucchesi on the roster? Well, there's 2 guys, Yohan Ramirez and Sean Reid-Foley. I'd imagine Ramirez is as good as gone. But Sean Reid-Foley is an interesting case here because, yes, he gave up 2 earned runs today or on Tuesday. Now, those are his first earned runs allowed all season. And even further, he had only allowed 1 hit in his first 10 appearances. I'll say that again, 1 hit allowed in his first 10 appearances. Now, he gave up 4 hits in this one against the Phillies, but he's kind of taxed at this point. 23 pitches in 2 innings on the 11th, gets a day off, and throws 15 pitches on Monday. Now he comes back and throws 24 pitches. Could have been a little bit of a tired arm. And yes, that in a lot of instances will necessitate DFAing a guy because you need fresh arms in the bullpen. He doesn't have optionality. He's probably not going to pitch for the rest of this series against the Phillies. You won't get him back likely until Miami. So, yeah, you DFA him. You bring in Drew Smith. You DFA Yohan Ramirez. You get Lucchesi for the spot start. And then you can send Lucchesi down, bring up a fresh arm for that bullpen. And that's unfortunately the way the cookie crumbles a lot of times. And maybe that's what happens with Sean Reid-Foley. But I'd like to point out a reliever the Mets lost at the end of spring training. Austin Adams was a guy I spoke highly about throughout spring training, a guy that I thought had a chance to make the team because he looked great in spring. Wasn't on the MLB roster, was on a minor league deal, had an out in his contract basically, or maybe I can't remember if it was an out or sort of a handshake agreement, whatever it was. If there was a major league offer on the table, he could go. So he gets traded to the Oakland Athletics. Well, Austin Adams in Oakland this year, 19 games, has 20 strikeouts and 14 2/3 innings pitched. He's only allowed 2 earned runs in 19 appearances. He has a 1.23 ERA. It's a guy you kind of wish you had back. And Sean Reid-Foley, prior to Tuesday's appearance, was pretty damn good in the Mets bullpen. So, yes, you can lose him and you can plug in somebody else, and it's not the worst thing in the world. But ideally, you'd like to hang on to him, at least in my opinion. So how do you do that and get fresh arms in your pen? Well, you can DFA Yohan Ramirez and Adrian Houser. That gives you Drew Smith. So then you have Smith, Diaz, Garrett, Ottavino available after Lucchesi, and hopefully that's good enough. And if it's not, I don't know, maybe Mark Vientos is pitching. Who knows? But that gets you through the one game. Then you can option Lucchesi. You call on someone else. If you look at the guys on the 40, Daniel, Nunez, Danny Young, they can't come back until May 19th. Cole Sulser can't come back until the 22nd. Josh Walker pitched on Tuesday night. So Grant Hartwig is the one guy on the roster that's available to return. I'd imagine he's heading to Philly because you need arms. The other guy I'd look at is Yaxel Rios, who is not on the 40, but is pitching to a 2.04 ERA this year and has gone multiple innings in Syracuse and did that also some in spring training if memory serves. So let's say you want Rios. You got to get him on the 40. How do you do that? Well, here you go. If you clear Ramirez, you clear Houser, you got plenty of spots in this 40-man roster to be able to eventually get Peterson back on and to add a guy like Rios to give you another reliever who I think you'd be able to option up and down. So we'll see. We'll see how this all ends up working out for the Mets, what they decide to do. But they need fresh arms. So you could either see them just go with the common denominator of Sean Reid-Foley, taxed, DFA, Yohan Ramirez, taxed, DFA. You bring up Smith and Lucchesi and you just keep on turning things, or get a little bit creative and you take a guy in Houser who absolutely pitched himself off this roster, definitely pitched himself out of the rotation, but you can say in your 45-day sample, David Stearns, that he wasn't good enough. And you can acknowledge that right now on the starting pitching depth chart, you have the current 5 guys on your rotation. You have Lucchesi, who's coming up for a spot start, and McGill, who should be in the rotation after that. That's 7 ahead of Houser. You got David Peterson coming. That's 8 ahead of Houser. And if Kodai Senga comes back in June, that's 9. If Houser's the 10th guy on your depth chart, you might as well clear him from the roster and just say, all right, if the 10th guy on our depth chart ends up being Max Kranick, who's sitting in Syracuse, or Dom Hamill, whoever it is, you cross that bridge when you come to it. I think there's a chance that we see a Mets tweet on Wednesday that is music to the ears of Mets fans who have been griping about these guys, where you see Joey Wendell and Adrian Houser have been designated for assignment, or maybe be Joey Wendell, Adrian Houser, and Yohan Ramirez have been designated for assignment. Drew Smith has been activated off the IL. Joey Lucchesi and Mark Vientos have been recalled. That could be what happens. We'll see. But I'm excited to see the Mets get some fresh blood. Let's see if they can go into Philly and piss off some fans who are going to be cocky, looking for, I guess, a fresh sweep. They called it a 2-game sweep in New York. To me, this is a 4-game series. So we'll see if the Mets can get back in it. And then go into Miami and start beating up bad teams when you face them on the schedule. And hopefully the Mets can get themselves back to 500 and then eventually over it and get some good vibes back in that clubhouse. We'll see what happens, but I'm very excited to watch Mark Vientos hit against Ranger Suarez and to see where the Mets go moving forward. We'll be covering all of it. I still got to tell you about Ryan Clifford in Binghamton. We'll do that on tomorrow's show, amongst other topics. Of course, we'll talk about how this game goes and also what the Mets did with this roster. So make sure you tune in. If you're listening on the audio side, follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We're trying to make a push to 9,000 subs. So I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, be part of our texting service, you can find the link in the episode description. You can follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. Now, after your second watch, head over to Locked On Sports today to be up to date on everything going on in the NBA and the NHL playoffs.